Hi everyone, so today I'll be giving you some background information about nouns. By the end of this video, you should have a pretty good idea about what forms nouns take and basically what functions that they have in sentences. The hardest thing for beginners would definitely have to be understanding the case system, which is how nouns function in the Latin language. In English, I'll give you an example, but in English, a noun's function in the sentence is shown usually by its order in the sentence. So just let me write English above. And an example of this is seen in the sentence, the girl eats the burger. And you can tell by the placement in the sentence and also by the fact that the girl is the one doing the action, that the girl is the subject. Now in Latin, it's a little bit different because the Latin language changes the endings of nouns based on how that noun is used in the sentence. So I'll give you an example of how it works in Latin now. In Latin, puella means girl, but you can tell by the ending that it will definitely have to be the subject. Or it could be something else, but I'll get into that later on. However, if you wanted to change it to the object, then you'd have to change the ending to am, so the word would be puellam. So that's what I mean by the Latin changes the ending of the word to reflect how it acts in the sentence. So right now, if you don't have a solid understanding of English grammar, don't worry about it. Knowing English grammar is pretty important for learning the case system, so I'll go in detail about what you have to know from English grammar later on in the video. So for now, I'm just going to start off with 3 basic facts about nouns. I'll write down 3 basic facts. They're pretty key facts, and they'll give you a basis on which you can center your studies. So first of all, nouns have gender. And if you've taken Spanish or maybe French, you are probably pretty familiar with this concept of nouns having gender. However, Latin is different in that instead of having 2 genders, masculine and feminine, it has a 3rd gender as well. And so it has masculine, it can be feminine, and the 3rd gender is neuter, which is neither masculine nor feminine. Okay, that brings us to the second point. Nouns have 7 basic cases. 7 basic cases. So basically, nouns can act as subject, direct objects, indirect objects, and so on. People often refer to the word case to refer to the function of a noun in a sentence. And again, I'll discuss cases more in depth later on in this video, so hopefully you'll get a clear picture of what exactly a case is, because I understand that it's a pretty foreign concept for only English speakers. So that brings us to the 3rd point, that Latin has 5 declensions. And basically what a declension is a set of endings for nouns that form their cases in the same way. And basically to decline a noun means just to list all the possible case forms for that noun. And of course, I will obviously get into declensions later on, and you'll have a clear idea of what exactly a declension is. So now you must be wondering, well, what do all these different cases actually mean? As I mentioned before, there are 7 of them. So now I'm going to go ahead and just list the 7 cases, and then we'll go into depth more about each one. So the 7 cases are as follows, and they're usually written in this order. There's first nominative, and we abbreviate that N. Genitive, abbreviated with a G, and you probably got the idea. Dative, D. Accusative, and that's ACC, because the 5th case is ablative, which also starts with an A, and that's AB. Sometimes I like to do ABL. And then vocative is next, and locative. And if you've looked in any other sources, or maybe if you've watched some other videos, they might have told you that there are only 5 cases. The reason is because usually only the first 5 are discussed. The second or the last 2 cases are so rarely used that usually people don't even list them. But I'll still talk a little bit about them just so that you have a solid understanding of the vocative and locative under your belt. So let me start off with the nominative, just going in order. Let me write that down again. Okay, so the nominative can function as one of 2 different grammatical cases. It can be either the subject or the predicate nominative, and that is usually abbreviated PN. And I'll give you an example of each used in a sentence. Subject is always the person or thing doing the verb or performing the action. So I'll give you an example. Caesar sends a letter. Whoops. And in this sentence, Caesar would be the subject because he is the one who is performing the verb. He's the one who is sending the letter. Now I'll give you an example of the predicate nominative, how that works. So a predicate nominative is used to describe the subject. It basically renames the subject. And it can come before or after the linking verb, but a linking verb is a verb that connects the predicate nominative with the subject, and basically most linking verbs are states of being, like the word is, be, been, have been. They can also be sense words like tastes, seems, looks, but I'll just give you a simple sentence so you get the idea. Virgil is a poet. So in this case, both Virgil, let me underline that, Virgil and poet would both be in the nominative case because Virgil is the subject, I'll write an S up there so you remember, subject, and poet is the predicate nominative. And is, I'll write in a different color, is the linking verb because it links the subject to the predicate nominative. It basically renames Virgil as a poet. Okay, so that brings us on to the next case, which is genitive. And in English, there's really no equivalent English grammatical case, but nevertheless, the genitive case is still very frequently used and very important as well. So, genitive case is used to indicate possession. So I'll write possession. And it's translated as of blank. And obviously your noun that's in the genitive case would go in the blank. And I'll give you an example of this to make it clearer. The doll of the girl was new. Let me put that in quotes. So obviously based on what I just told you, of the girl would be the genitive because it's the girl who possesses the doll. The doll is of the girl, so thus it would be in the genitive case. So next up, we will talk about dative. So nouns in the dative case function as the indirect object of the sentence. The indirect object is often a person, and it's what receives the direct object. So let me write down indirect object. And that's I-O. And we'll talk more about direct objects later on in the sentence, and hopefully that will clear things up for you. The indirect object, it can be translated as to blank, it usually is. However, it doesn't have to, the to is not necessary, and I'll give you an example of both ways. The first example is Augustus gave a medal to Marcus. Okay, so based on what I just told you about the to being the indicator word, to would be the dative. To Marcus would be the dative because he's the indirect object. He is who is receiving the direct object. Let me just write that above so that you know. To Marcus. Marcus is the indirect object. Okay, so now I'll give you an example without the to. Same sentence. Augustus gave Marcus a medal. Okay, and you can just go ahead and try and find the indirect object yourself. If you said Marcus, congratulations. That is the indirect object. As you can see, there is no to. However, you can still tell that it's the indirect object because Marcus is the one receiving the direct object, which is the medal. Okay, so next up we have the accusative case. Okay, and the accusative functions as the direct object of the sentence. And we just talked a little bit about direct objects. That's abbreviated DO, uppercase C, uppercase O. And a direct object is a noun that receives the action of the verb. So in the sentence I just gave you, I'll just rewrite it again, but Augustus gave Marcus a medal. Okay, so as I told you earlier, medal would be the direct object because it's receiving the action of the verb, and thus it would be in the accusative case. And you might be wondering, well, why isn't Marcus the indirect object? It's because he's not the one receiving the action of the verb. Augustus didn't give Marcus, he gave a medal to Marcus. Okay, so I'll move on to the ablative case now. Okay, so ablative. And the ablative case is another one of those cases like the genitive that doesn't really have a solid English equivalent grammatical case. But nevertheless, it is still extremely important. And the accusative actually has the ablative actually has dozens of uses. You'll get into them later, but for now, you can just remember that it's usually translated as by blank or with blank. And I'll just tell you about the ablative of means because that's one use of the ablative that is used extremely frequently, almost as frequently as by and with. I'll just write down ablative of means. And basically what that is, an ablative of means is it's used for the noun that is used to do something else. It's used to perform an action. So I'll give you an example. And the ablative means can be translated as by means of blank or by blank or with blank. And later on when you get more comfortable, you'll be able to tell the difference between a lot of them. But for now, I'll just give you an example so that you can see what exactly an ablative of means is. So, for example, first one, I'll use with means. He fixed the cart by means of a hammer. Okay, so obviously based on what I just told you, you could tell that by means of a hammer, the hammer would be in the ablative case because it's an ablative of means as shown by the means of the precursor. So now I'll give you an example without the by means of, and hopefully you'll be able to tell that they're both ablative of means. So same sentence, he fixed the cart with a hammer. And for now, you'll be able to tell, a little trick that you can use to see if it's an ablative of means if the word is with, is you can replace the with a by means of and see if it still makes sense, which in this case it obviously does. So obviously with the hammer is the ablative of means as well. But for now, if you're more comfortable, if you're a little bit shaky right now, you can just translate it as by or with. So next up, I will tell you about the vocative case. And like I said before, vocative and the next one, locative, are pretty rarely used, so I wouldn't worry about them for now. It's just good to have a solid understanding of them under your belt. Okay, so vocative is used for direct address. And basically what that is if a noun is used, if you're directly addressing someone, their name would be in the vocative case. And I will give you an example of that. Billy, hand me the phone. So in this case, Billy would be in the vocative case because you're directly addressing him. You're telling him to hand you the phone. So next up, I'll give you the locative case. And locative, it's used even more rarely than vocative, so I'll just tell you it's place where something is happening. Oh, excuse me. It's the place where something is happening, and that's all I'll tell you about that for now. There's really not much you have to know about locative just yet, but later on, it'll be good to know. So next up, now that I've given you background information about nouns, I just want to tell you about the dictionary entry form, and as implied by the name, that's the form that you're going to get if you look up a noun in the dictionary, in a Latin dictionary. Dictionary entry form. Okay. And basically, I'll give you an example that I'll use the word puella because I used it earlier, and that's pretty much the first word that any Latin student learns. Puella, puellae, feminine, and it means girl. Okay, so first up, you have the noun in the nominative case. So I'll write nominative. Your second word is always going to be your noun in your genitive case. And as you remember, nominative and then genitive was the order in which we declined the word, and so on. And then your third letter, I guess, would obviously be the gender. And as you remember, it could be masculine, feminine, or neuter, and they're usually abbreviated like this. And then last up, you have your meaning, and they'll often give you multiple meanings. Just because different words work well in different contexts. But basically, you can see obviously this is the nominative, genitive, gender, and meaning of the word, but you can also tell what declension the noun belongs to, and second of all, how to decline the rest of the word. And we'll talk more about dictionary entries in the next video when we start learning the endings for declension. But if you have any questions for now, please feel free to email me. My email address is in the Q&A section. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So until next time, thank you for watching and good luck with your studies.